In the shadowed corridors of Buckingham Palace, where whispers carry the weight of centuries and secrets are currency more valuable than crowns, one woman's final act would shatter every protocol the royal family had ever known. Queen Elizabeth II, in her dying days, made a decision that would send shockwaves through the monarchy and forever change the life of Catherine, Princess of Wales. What started as a simple request to look after Catherine became something far more extraordinary. Hidden beneath layers of royal tradition and ancient customs lay a treasure so precious, so deeply personal, that its very existence had been erased from official records. For 70 years, the Queen had guarded this secret, waiting for the right person to entrust it to. That person was Kate. But this wasn't just about jewels or artifacts. This was about a promise made decades ago, a debt of honor that transcended bloodlines, and a revelation that would force the royal family to confront truths they had buried for generations. As Catherine would soon discover, some gifts come with a price that extends far beyond their material value, and some secrets once revealed can never be hidden again. The story that follows is one of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds that form between women who understand the true cost of wearing a crown. It's a tale that proves sometimes the most powerful acts of love come not from those we expect, but from those who see in us what we cannot yet see in ourselves. The autumn rain pelted against the windows of Windsor Castle as Catherine, Princess of Wales, hurried through the ancient corridors. Her heels clicked against the stone floors, each step echoing the urgency in her heart. The Queen had requested to see her alone, a summons that came with an unusual sense of gravity that made even the most seasoned palace staff exchange worried glances. Catherine had been part of the royal family for over a decade, yet she still felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders as she walked these halls. Every portrait seemed to watch her. Every tapestry held stories of triumph and tragedy that spanned centuries. But today felt different. Today the very air seemed charged with anticipation, as if the castle itself was holding its breath. The Queen's private secretary, a stern man named Harrison who had served the monarchy for 35 years, met Catherine at the entrance to the Queen's study. His usually composed demeanor betrayed a hint of nervousness as he adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Your Royal Highness," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "Her Majesty has been quite specific about this meeting. She wishes to see you alone, without any staff present, and has requested complete privacy." He paused, his eyes meeting Catherine's with an intensity she had never seen before. "She also asked me to give you this." Harrison handed Catherine an ornate silver key, its surface worn smooth by decades of use. The key was unlike anything she had seen in the palace before. Where royal keys were typically elaborate and decorative, this one was simple, almost humble, yet it radiated an inexplicable sense of importance. Catherine turned the key over in her palm, feeling its weight. It was heavier than it appeared, and as her fingers traced its edges, she noticed tiny engravings that seemed to tell a story she couldn't yet understand. There were symbols that looked vaguely familiar, dates that meant nothing to her, and what appeared to be initials intertwined in a pattern that suggested deep personal meaning. "What does this open?" Catherine asked, but Harrison had already begun walking away, his footsteps fading into the distance. She was left alone with the key and a growing sense that whatever lay ahead would change everything. She thought she knew about her place in the royal family. The Queen's study was a sanctuary within the castle, a place where state business mixed with personal reflection. As Catherine entered, she was immediately struck by how frail the Queen appeared. Elizabeth II, the woman who had been the embodiment of strength and stability for 7 decades, seemed somehow smaller, as if the weight of her years had finally begun to show. But the Queen's eyes were as sharp as ever. They fixed on Catherine with an intensity that made her feel as though every thought, every emotion was being carefully evaluated. The Queen gestured to a chair opposite her own, a gesture so subtle that anyone else might have missed it. But Catherine had learned to read the royal family's unspoken language over the years. "Catherine, my dear," the Queen began, her voice carrying the same authority it always had, despite its newfound fragility. "There are things that must be said, and I find myself running out of time to say them." She paused, studying Catherine's face as if memorizing it. "You have been a gift to this family in ways you cannot possibly understand." Catherine felt her throat tighten with emotion. The Queen rarely expressed personal feelings so directly, and hearing these words felt like receiving a benediction she had never known she needed. "Throughout my reign," the Queen continued, "I have watched many women attempt to navigate the treacherous waters of royal life. Some have succeeded, others have not. But you, Catherine, you have done something quite remarkable. You have managed to remain yourself while becoming one of us. The Queen rose from her chair, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose body no longer responded as quickly as her mind. She walked to an ancient writing desk that sat beneath a window overlooking the castle grounds. Her fingers traced along its surface until they found a hidden compartment that Catherine would never have noticed existed. From this compartment, the Queen withdrew a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age and its cover worn from countless handlings. She held it as one might hold a sacred text, with reverence and deep affection. "This journal," the Queen said, returning to her chair, "contains the true history of our family, not the sanitized version that appears in official biographies or the sensationalized accounts that fill tabloid newspapers. This is the real story, told by the women who lived it, in their own words." Catherine's eyes widened as she realized the magnitude of what she was being shown. Royal history was carefully curated, each event filtered through layers of protocol and public relations. The idea that there existed an unvarnished account, written by the queens and princesses themselves, was almost unthinkable. "My grandmother, Queen Mary, began this tradition," the Queen explained, opening the journal carefully. "She believed that the women of our family needed a way to speak truthfully to each other across the generations. Each entry is a letter, really, addressed to the future queens and princesses who would follow." The Queen's fingers found a particular page, one marked with a faded blue ribbon. "This entry was written by my grandmother on the day she learned that my father would become king. She wrote about the weight of responsibility, about the sacrifices that would be required, and about the strength that each royal woman must find within herself." Catherine leaned forward, drawn by the gravity of what was being shared. She could see the elegant handwriting, the carefully chosen words that spoke across decades to offer wisdom and comfort to future generations. "Why are you showing me this?" Catherine asked. "'Cause, my dear, you are the future of this monarchy. Not just as William's wife, but as the woman who will one day guide and protect this family when I am no longer here to do so." She paused, her eyes growing distant as if seeing something Catherine could not. "And because there is something in this journal that belongs to you, something that has been waiting for you long before you ever knew this family existed." The Queen turned several pages, her movements deliberate and careful. Catherine could see that each page was filled with different handwriting, different voices from different eras, all connected by their shared experience of royal duty and sacrifice. "Here," the Queen said, stopping at a page near the end of the journal, "read this." Catherine took the journal with trembling hands. The page before her bore handwriting she didn't recognize, elegant script that seemed to dance across the aged paper. The date at the top of the page made her gasp. It was from 1993, years before she had even met William. "To the woman who will love my grandson William with the same devotion that I have loved Charles, who will understand that duty and love are not opposing forces but two sides of the same precious coin." Catherine's hands shook as she continued reading. The words were clearly meant for her, written by a woman she had never met but who had somehow known that she would exist, that she would find her way into the royal family and into this very room. "Princess Diana wrote that entry," the Queen said quietly, 3 months before her death. "She came to me with this journal, begging me to add her words to its pages. She had a gift, you see, for seeing things that others could not. She knew, somehow, that William would find someone special, someone who would need guidance from the women who had walked this path before her." Catherine felt tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. Diana's words were like a letter from beyond, filled with advice, warnings, and most surprisingly, hope. The late princess had written about the challenges Catherine would face, the criticism and scrutiny that would test her resolve, but also about the incredible good she would be able to do, the lives she would touch, and the strength she would discover within herself. "Diana also left something else for you," the Queen continued, her voice growing softer. "Something that even Charles doesn't know about, something that she entrusted to me with specific instructions about when and how it should be given to you." The Queen held up the silver key that Catherine had forgotten she was still clutching. "This key opens a safe deposit box at Courts Bank in London. Diana arranged for this account to be established under a false name, accessible only to the woman she knew would someday marry her son. The key was to be given to that woman only when I felt she had truly proven herself worthy of Diana's trust." Catherine stared at the key, feeling as though the ground beneath her feet had shifted. The idea that Diana, a woman she had never met but had always felt a deep connection to, had left something specifically for her was almost too much to comprehend. "What's in the box?" Catherine asked, her voice barely audible. The Queen's expression grew mysterious, almost mischievous. "I honestly don't know." Diana insisted on complete secrecy. She told me only that what she was leaving would help you understand your true role in this family, and that it would give you the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The weight of this revelation settled over Catherine like a warm blanket. She thought about all the times she had felt Diana's presence. The moments when she had worn the engagement ring and felt an inexplicable sense of connection to a woman she had never known. Now she understood that Diana had been watching over her, preparing for her, long before their paths had crossed through William. "Why now?" Catherine asked. "Why are you telling me this today?" The Queen was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on something beyond the window. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of years and the acceptance of mortality. "Because my time is drawing to a close, Catherine. Because this family is about to face changes that will test every bond we have built over the years, and because Diana was right about you. You have proven yourself worthy of this trust, and more importantly, you have proven that you have the strength to carry on the work that she began." The Queen reached for Catherine's hand. Her touch warmed despite the coolness of her skin. "Promise me, Catherine, that you will go to that bank. Promise me that you will read whatever Diana left for you, and that you will carry her wisdom forward as you continue to build your own legacy within this family." Catherine nodded, unable to speak past the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. She was holding more than just a key. She was holding a connection to the past and a responsibility for the future that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The Queen squeezed her hand gently. "Good. Now, there's something else we need to discuss, something about your role in the family that goes beyond what anyone else knows." She paused, her eyes twinkling with the same mischief Catherine had seen moments before. "You see, Catherine, being the future Queen Consort is only part of your destiny." Diana understood this, which is why she prepared so carefully for your arrival. "You're not just here to support William. You're here to protect something far more precious and far more fragile than the crown itself." The following morning, Catherine found herself standing before the imposing facade of Courts Bank in London's Strand. The autumn wind whipped through her hair as she clutched the silver key, its metal now warm from her nervous grip. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with questions about what Diana could possibly have left for her, and why the Queen had seemed so certain that Catherine needed to discover it now. The bank itself was a monument to discretion and old money, its Georgian facade speaking of centuries spent guarding the secrets of Britain's most powerful families. Catherine had called ahead, using the account number the Queen had whispered to her as their meeting concluded. The bank manager, a distinguished woman named Mrs. Thornfield, had confirmed the account's existence without betraying even the slightest surprise at Catherine's royal identity. As Catherine was escorted through marble corridors lined with oil paintings of long-dead financiers, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking toward a moment that would redefine everything she thought she knew about her place in the royal family. The Queen's words from the previous day echoed in her mind. "You're here to protect something far more precious and far more fragile than the crown itself." Mrs. Thornfield led Catherine to a private viewing room deep within the bank's vault system. The room was small but elegant, furnished with a single mahogany table and 2 leather chairs. The walls were lined with safe deposit boxes, each one hiding secrets that could probably topple governments or destroy reputations if their contents were ever revealed. "Box number 1247, Mrs. Thornfield announced, producing a brass key that matched Catherine's silver one. This account was established in 1993 and has remained untouched since that time. The instructions left by the original depositor were very specific. The contents were to be accessed only by the woman who had married Prince William, and only when she presented the silver key." Catherine watched as Mrs. Thornfield inserted her brass key into the top lock of a medium-sized safe deposit box. The woman then stepped back, gesturing for Catherine to use her silver key in the bottom lock. The moment both keys turned, Catherine heard a soft click that seemed to reverberate through her entire being. "I'll leave you alone with the contents," Mrs. Thornfield said tactfully. "Take as much time as you need. Ring the bell when you're finished." Catherine was alone with Diana's secret, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it could be heard throughout the bank. She lifted the metal box from its housing and placed it on the mahogany table, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared to lift the lid. Inside, wrapped in layers of midnight blue silk, was a collection of items that took Catherine's breath away. The first thing she saw was a letter, written in the same elegant handwriting she had seen in the Queen's journal. Her name was written across the envelope in gold ink. "For Catherine, the woman who will complete my son's heart." Beneath the letter were several small velvet boxes, each one carefully labeled with dates spanning from the early 1980s to 1997. There was also a small leather notebook, its pages filled with what appeared to be detailed notes and observations. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in white tissue paper, was something that made Catherine gasp audibly, a photograph of herself as a child, playing in the garden of her family's home in Berkshire. Catherine picked up the photograph with shaking hands. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, wearing a yellow sundress and holding a daisy chain she had made. But how could Diana have possibly obtained this photograph? How could she have known about a little girl in Berkshire who wouldn't enter the royal family's orbit for another 2 decades? The letter seemed to call to her, so Catherine carefully opened the envelope and began to read. My dearest Catherine, if you are reading this letter, then my son has found his way to you, and you have proven yourself worthy of the extraordinary secret I am about to share. I know this will be difficult to believe, but I have been watching over you for most of your life, not through any supernatural means, but through a network of friends and connections that I established specifically to ensure that when William found love, it would be with someone who possessed the strength, intelligence, and compassion necessary to help him fulfill his destiny. You see, Catherine, William's role in this family goes far beyond what the public knows, and your role will be equally important. There are treasures within the royal collection that have never appeared in any official inventory. Artifacts and documents that tell the true story of our nation's history. These items are hidden throughout the royal residences, protected by a secret that has been passed down through generations of royal women. The Queen Mother once told me that every generation must have its guardian, a woman who understands that some knowledge is too dangerous for public consumption but too important to be lost forever. That guardian must be someone who exists outside the traditional bloodline, someone who chose this family rather than being born into it. Someone like you. Catherine paused in her reading, feeling as though the walls of the small room were closing in around her. The idea that Diana had somehow orchestrated her relationship with William was both thrilling and terrifying. How far back did this planning go? How many of the moments she had treasured as spontaneous and natural had actually been carefully guided by forces she couldn't see? She continued reading.
I know you must have questions, and I know this revelation must be overwhelming.
But please understand, Catherine, that nothing about William's love for you is fabricated or forced. What I did was simply ensure that when he was ready to find love, he would be in the right place at the right time to meet someone worthy of him. The love you share is entirely real and entirely your own. In the boxes I have left for you, you will find items that belong to every royal woman who served as guardian before me. Each piece tells a story, and each story will help you understand the magnitude of the responsibility that is now yours. But more than that, these items will give you the tools you need to protect, not just the royal family, but the entire foundation upon which our constitutional monarchy rests. Catherine set the letter aside and opened the first velvet box. Inside was a ring unlike anything she had ever seen. It appeared to be very old, with a central stone that seemed to shift colors as she moved it in the light. The band was inscribed with symbols that matched those she had seen on the silver key. As she lifted the ring, a small card fell from the box. Diana's handwriting explained, this ring belonged to Queen Elizabeth I. It was hidden away after her death because it contains a stone that is said to reveal the truth of any situation to its wearer. Elizabeth used it to navigate the treacherous political waters of her time. The Queen Mother wore it during World War II to help her discern which advisors could be trusted. I wore it during my final months to understand the true nature of the threats facing this family. Catherine slipped the ring onto her right hand and immediately felt a strange tingling sensation. The world around her seemed to come into sharper focus, as if she was seeing things clearly for the first time. When she looked at Diana's letter again, she could sense the love and concern that had guided every word, but also the fear that had driven Diana to such elaborate preparations. The second box contained a pendant that Diana's note identified as having belonged to Queen Victoria.
Victoria wore this during the most difficult decisions of her reign, the note explained.
It helps the wearer see beyond immediate consequences to the long-term effects of any choice. When you face impossible decisions as queen, this will help you choose the path that best serves the people, even when that path seems hardest. Box after box revealed treasures that spanned centuries of royal history, each one accompanied by detailed notes about its provenance and purpose. There was a bracelet that had belonged to Catherine of Aragon, a brooch that Anne Boleyn had worn to her coronation, and earrings that had been gifted to Princess Diana by a tribe of Aboriginal women during her tour of Australia. But it was the contents of the final box that truly took Catherine's breath away. Inside was a small golden key, even more ornate than the silver one she had used to access the safe deposit box. Diana's note was longer for this item, filled with warnings and instructions that made Catherine's head spin. This golden key, Diana had written, opens a room within Buckingham Palace that appears on no architectural plans and is known to only a handful of people in each generation. The room contains the true treasures of the royal collection, including documents that could change our understanding of British history, and artifacts that some would kill to possess. The existence of this room is the family's greatest secret, and its protection is the guardian's most sacred duty. Only the reigning monarch, the guardian, and one trusted advisor are ever permitted to know of its location. When Elizabeth dies, Charles will be told of its existence, but only you will know its location and possess the means to access it. Catherine, what I am asking of you is enormous. I am asking you to become the keeper of secrets that could destabilize governments and rewrite history books. But I am also giving you the power to protect this family and this nation in ways that no one else can. The choice is yours, but know that if you accept this responsibility, you will never be able to share it with anyone, not even William. Catherine felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Diana was asking. To accept this role would mean carrying secrets that could never be shared, making decisions that could affect the course of history, and living with the constant knowledge that she possessed power that others would do anything to obtain. She opened the leather notebook Diana had left and found page after page of detailed instructions. There were maps of secret passages within the royal residences, lists of trusted contacts who could help in emergencies, and even contingency plans for evacuating the most precious items if the monarchy ever faced existential threat. As Catherine read, she began to understand why Diana had chosen her. It wasn't just about her character or her love for William. Diana had recognized in Catherine someone who possessed the rare combination of intelligence, discretion, and moral strength necessary to handle such enormous responsibility. The notebook also contained personal reflections from Diana's time as guardian. She wrote about the isolation that came with keeping such secrets, the weight of making decisions that could affect millions of people, and the comfort she found in knowing that she was part of an unbroken chain of women who had protected the monarchy throughout its darkest hours. There will be times, Diana had written, when you will question whether this burden is worth carrying. There will be moments when you will want to share it with William, to have someone who truly understands the scope of your responsibility. But remember that your strength comes not from sharing this burden, but from carrying it with grace and wisdom. You are not alone, Catherine. Every woman who came before you faced these same challenges, and they found the strength to persevere. So will you. Catherine closed the notebook and looked around the small room at the treasures Diana had entrusted to her care. Each item represented not just historical significance, but also the trust that generations of royal women had placed in her ability to protect their legacy. As she carefully repacked everything into the safe deposit box, Catherine realized that her life had just divided into two distinct periods, before this moment and after. She was no longer simply Catherine, Princess of Wales. She was now the guardian of secrets that stretched back centuries, the protector of treasures that could change the world, and the keeper of a trust that would define every decision she made for the rest of her life. When Mrs. Thornfield returned to escort her from the bank, Catherine carried herself differently. There was a new weight to her movements, a gravitas that hadn't been there before. She had accepted Diana's gift and all the responsibility that came with it. Now she had to figure out how to live with the knowledge that she possessed power beyond anything she had ever imagined, while maintaining the facade of being simply a devoted wife and mother. 3 weeks after her visit to Court's Bank, Catherine found herself standing in the Queen's private chambers at Buckingham Palace at precisely 3 a.m. The golden key Diana had left her felt warm in her palm, and the weight of the secret she now carried seemed to press against her chest with every breath. The Queen had summoned her for this clandestine meeting, explaining that some knowledge could only be shared under the cover of darkness, when the palace staff was minimal and the corridors empty. "Follow me, Catherine," the Queen whispered, her voice carrying an urgency that Catherine had never heard before. "And remember, what you see tonight must remain between us until the day you pass this responsibility to the next guardian." They moved through passages that Catherine had never seen before, hidden doorways that opened at the Queen's touch and revealed corridors that existed in the spaces between the palace's official rooms. The Queen moved with surprising agility for her age, navigating the secret pathways with the confidence of someone who had walked them countless times over the decades. These passages were built during the reign of George III, the Queen explained as they descended a narrow staircase lit only by their flashlights. Officially, they were meant to provide escape routes during times of war or civil unrest. In reality, they serve a much more important purpose. They allow us to reach the most sacred parts of our heritage without detection. Catherine followed the Queen deeper into the bowels of the palace, past foundations that dated back centuries and through rooms that seemed to exist outside of time itself. The air grew cooler as they descended, and Catherine could feel the weight of history pressing down on her from above. Finally, they reached a heavy wooden door that looked utterly unremarkable, except for a small golden lock that perfectly matched the key Catherine carried. The Queen gestured for Catherine to use her key, and as the lock clicked open, Catherine felt as though she was about to cross a threshold, from which there would be no return. The room beyond the door was unlike anything Catherine could have imagined. It was vast, stretching far beyond the reach of their flashlights, filled with treasures that seemed to glow with their own inner light. The walls were lined with paintings that Catherine recognized as works that had been reported lost or destroyed centuries ago. Display cases held artifacts that she had only read about in history books, items that scholars had spent lifetimes searching for without success. "Welcome to the true treasury," the Queen said, her voice filled with reverence. "This collection represents the real wealth of the British monarchy, accumulated over more than 1,000 years and hidden away to protect it from those who would use it for personal gain or political manipulation." As their eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, Catherine began to make out individual items that took her breath away. There were manuscripts in Leonardo da Vinci's own handwriting detailing inventions that were centuries ahead of their time. She saw jewelry that had belonged to Cleopatra, artifacts from King Arthur's court, and documents signed by Shakespeare that proved beyond doubt that he had written all the plays attributed to him. "How is this possible?" Catherine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How has no one discovered this room?" The Queen smiled in the darkness. "However, because, my dear, the official palace records show this space as foundation rubble left over from early construction. The room appears on no architectural drawings, and access is limited to a select few individuals in each generation. The knowledge of its existence dies with each guardian and is reborn with the next." They walked deeper into the treasury, passing displays that chronicled British history in a way no textbook ever could. Catherine saw personal letters between Henry VIII and his wives, revealing the true nature of their relationships. There were military plans from Winston Churchill that showed strategies never implemented but which could have changed the course of World War II. Scientific discoveries by British inventors that had been suppressed to prevent technological advantage from falling into enemy hands. "But why keep all this hidden?" Catherine asked. "Think of what historians could learn, what the public could understand about their own heritage." The Queen paused before a display case containing what appeared to be ancient scrolls. "Because, Catherine, knowledge is power, and power in the wrong hands can destroy everything we have worked to build. Some of these artifacts contain information that could destabilize governments, start wars, or undermine the very foundation of modern society. Our role as guardians is not to hide the truth from the world, but to ensure that the truth is revealed only when the world is ready to handle it responsibly." They continued their tour, and Catherine began to understand the awesome responsibility that Diana had passed to her. Each artifact represented not just historical significance but also the potential to change the world in ways both wonderful and terrifying. The room contained proof of scientific discoveries that had been made centuries before they were officially credited to their known inventors. There were religious texts that challenged accepted theological doctrine, political documents that could rewrite the history of international relations. "Here," the Queen said, stopping before a particularly ornate display case, "is perhaps the most dangerous item in our collection." Inside the case was a simple leather journal, worn with age but still intact. The Queen used her own key to open the case and carefully removed the journal, handling it as if it were made of the most fragile glass. "This journal," the Queen explained, "contains the true account of the Protestant Reformation as written by Henry VIII himself. In it, he admits that his break with Rome was not motivated by theological conviction or even by his desire to divorce Catherine of Aragon. He reveals that he discovered evidence of corruption within the Catholic Church so vast and so damaging that he feared it would destroy Christianity itself if it became public."
Catherine stared at the journal in amazement.
"The implications of something like that." "Exactly," the Queen nodded. "If this journal were ever made public, it would call into question the fundamental basis of the Church of England, and potentially destabilize religious institutions around the world. Henry chose to create his own church not out of defiance but out of a desire to preserve faith itself by removing it from corrupted leadership." The Queen carefully returned the journal to its case. "Every item in this treasury presents similar challenges. We possess proof that could overturn historical narratives, scientific documents that could revolutionize technology, and political correspondence that could topple governments. The Guardian's responsibility is to determine which knowledge serves the greater good, and which knowledge would do more harm than good if revealed." As they moved through the treasury, Catherine began to notice something remarkable. about how the collection was organized. The items were not arranged chronologically or by type, but rather by the level of danger their revelation might pose. The most dangerous items were kept in a separate section, sealed behind additional security measures that required both the Guardian's key and a special combination that the Queen now shared with Catherine. Diana understood the weight of this responsibility better than most, the Queen said as they reached the most secure section of the treasury. She spent countless hours in this room, studying each item and its potential impact. She developed new systems for categorizing the artifacts, and even arranged for certain items to be gradually released to the public through seemingly unrelated archaeological discoveries or scholarly research. The Queen showed Catherine a detailed cataloging system that Diana had created, a complex cross-reference that tracked not only the contents of the treasury but also the global political and social climate that might affect when and how various items could be safely revealed. It was clear that Diana had approached her role as guardian with the same meticulous planning she had brought to her charitable work. But Diana also understood something that previous guardians had not, the Queen continued. She realized that the guardian's role was not just to protect these secrets, but also to ensure that the most valuable knowledge eventually found its way into the right hands. She developed a network of trusted scholars, scientists, and leaders around the world who could be gradually introduced to certain information when the time was right. Catherine learned that Diana had been responsible for several major historical discoveries that had been attributed to other sources. Archaeological finds that had revolutionized understanding of ancient civilizations, scientific papers that had advanced medical research, and historical documents that had provided new insights into significant events. All of these had been carefully leaked from the treasury through Diana's network, disguised as independent discoveries. Your role, the Queen explained, will be to continue and expand upon Diana's work. You will need to study every item in this collection, understand its potential impact, and develop strategies for gradually releasing the most beneficial information while maintaining absolute secrecy about the most dangerous. The weight of this responsibility was staggering. Catherine realized that she would essentially be making decisions that could affect the course of human knowledge and development. The wrong choice could lead to chaos and destruction, but the right choices could advance humanity in ways that would benefit generations. As their tour of the treasury neared its end, the Queen led Catherine to a small office space that had been set up within the chamber. The office contained computers with the most advanced security systems Catherine had ever seen, communication equipment that could reach anywhere in the world, and an extensive library of reference materials that would help her research the historical and contemporary context of each artifact. Diana worked in this office almost every night during her final years, the Queen revealed. She knew her time was limited, and she wanted to ensure that as much knowledge as possible was properly cataloged and prepared for release. She also used this space to train the network of individuals who would continue her work after her death. Catherine sat down at the desk Diana had used, feeling a profound connection to the woman who had prepared so carefully for her arrival. On the desk was a computer terminal that Diana had apparently left in standby mode, its screen displaying a message that made Catherine's heart stop. "Welcome, Catherine. I knew you would find your way here eventually. Your real work begins now." The Queen smiled at Catherine's amazement. Diana was quite thorough in her preparations. She even recorded a series of video messages for you, explaining the most critical aspects of your new role. But first you need to understand the most important rule of being a guardian. The Queen's expression grew grave. No matter how much you may want to share this burden with William, no matter how much you may need his support, you can never reveal any of this to him. The guardian's role exists partly to protect the monarch from having to make these impossible decisions. Charles will know that this room exists, but only you will know what it contains and how to access it. This secret will be yours alone to carry. Catherine felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the isolation this role would bring. She would be making decisions that affected the entire world, yet she would never be able to discuss them with the person she loved most. The weight of that solitude was almost overwhelming. "How did you bear it?" Catherine asked. "How did you carry these secrets for so long without sharing them with Philip or Charles?" The Queen was quiet for a long moment, her eyes reflecting the weight of decades spent carrying impossible burdens. "You learned to find strength in the knowledge that you were serving something greater than yourself," she said finally. "And you remember that every woman who came before you faced the same isolation and found the courage to persevere. You will too, Catherine." Diana chose you not just for your character, but for your strength. She knew you could handle this responsibility, even when you doubted yourself. As they prepared to leave the treasury, the Queen handed Catherine a special key that would allow her to access the chamber whenever necessary. She also gave her a secure communication device that would connect her to Diana's network of trusted contacts around the world.
"Your training begins immediately," the Queen said as they locked the treasury door behind them. "You have much to learn and not much time to learn it. But remember, you are not starting from nothing. Diana has given you tools and allies that will help you succeed in ways she never could." As they made their way back through the secret passages to the main palace, Catherine realized that her life had changed irrevocably. She was now the keeper of humanity's most dangerous secrets, and the guardian of knowledge that could shape the future of civilization itself.
The weight of that responsibility was terrifying, but there was also something exhilarating about knowing that she had the power to influence the course of history in ways that could benefit millions of people. 6 months had passed since Catherine first entered the True Treasury, and the burden of her secret role was beginning to show in ways she hoped no one would notice. She found herself waking at 3 a.m, not from insomnia but from an internal clock that had synchronized itself with her nightly visits to the hidden chamber. The weight of the decisions she was making had changed her in fundamental ways, adding depth to her eyes that photographers attributed to maturity but which was actually the look of someone who carried the weight of history on her shoulders. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, Catherine was implementing the most ambitious plan she had developed since becoming Guardian. After months of studying Diana's notes and establishing contact with the worldwide network of trusted individuals, she was ready to execute what she privately called Operation Illumination, the careful release of information that could revolutionize medical research while maintaining absolute secrecy about its source. In the Treasury, Catherine had discovered a collection of medical manuscripts dating from the 12th century, written by physicians whose names had been lost to history but whose knowledge far exceeded anything that mainstream medicine had achieved even today. These manuscripts contained detailed descriptions of surgical procedures, pharmaceutical formulations, and treatment protocols that could save millions of lives if properly adapted to modern medicine. But the information couldn't simply be released. It had to be carefully seeded through Diana's network in a way that would make it appear to be the result of independent research and discovery. Catherine had spent weeks developing a strategy that would introduce this knowledge through 3 separate research institutions on different continents, each receiving pieces of the puzzle that would lead them to the same breakthrough through different paths. As Catherine worked at Diana's computer terminal, she felt the presence of the woman who had prepared this moment for her. The video messages Diana had recorded had become Catherine's most trusted guides, offering advice and encouragement that felt as immediate and personal as if Diana were sitting beside her in the chamber. "The hardest part of being Guardian," Diana had said in one of her recordings, "is not making the right decisions about what to reveal and what to hide. The hardest part is living with the isolation that comes from carrying knowledge that you can never share with the people you love most. William will notice changes in you, Catherine. He'll see that you're carrying burdens he can't understand, and he'll want to help. Your job is to protect him from this responsibility while maintaining the intimacy and trust that make your marriage strong." Catherine had already begun to experience this challenge. William had noticed her late-night absences and her preoccupied demeanor during public appearances. He had begun asking gentle questions about what was troubling her, and each time she deflected his concern, she felt a small piece of their closeness slip away. But tonight, as she finalized the communications that would set Operation Illumination in motion, Catherine felt a surge of purpose that reminded her why she had accepted this role. The medical knowledge she was about to release would lead to breakthroughs in treating autoimmune diseases that affected millions of people worldwide. Children who would otherwise face lives of suffering would have access to treatments that could give them normal, healthy futures. The first communication went to Dr. Sarah Chen, a researcher at Johns Hopkins who was part of Diana's network but didn't know about the Treasury's existence. Dr. Chen believed she was receiving tips from an anonymous philanthropist who had access to rare historical documents. Catherine's message to Dr. Chen contained specific suggestions about research directions that would lead her to recreate medieval pharmaceutical compounds using modern techniques. The second communication went to Professor Miguel Santos at the University of São Paulo, who specialized in South American medicinal plants. Catherine provided him with coordinates for archaeological sites where certain rare plants could be found, plants that the medieval manuscripts identified as crucial components for advanced treatments. The third communication was the most delicate, going to Dr. Amara Okafor at Cambridge University. Dr. Okafor was the only member of Diana's network who knew that her anonymous benefactor had access to extraordinary historical resources, though she had no idea about the full scope of the Treasury. Catherine's message to Dr. Okafor contained direct quotations from the medieval manuscripts, translated into modern medical terminology, but presented as discoveries from a recently acquired private collection of historical documents. As Catherine sent each message through the secure communication network Diana had established,
She felt the weight of responsibility that came with potentially changing the course of medical history. If her plan worked, within 2 years these 3 researchers would independently develop breakthrough treatments that would save countless lives. If it failed, or if the wrong people became suspicious about the source of the information, the entire Guardian network could be compromised. After completing her communications, Catherine accessed another section of Diana's files that she had been preparing to tackle for weeks. This section contained information about members of the royal family that had never been recorded in official biographies or historical accounts.
Diana had been meticulous in documenting family secrets, personal struggles, and hidden relationships that painted a very different picture of royal history than what the public knew. What Catherine discovered in these files challenged everything she thought she knew about the royal family's approach to duty and sacrifice.
She learned that Prince Philip had been offered opportunities to profit personally from his royal position that would have made him one of the wealthiest men in the world, but had turned down every offer in order to maintain the integrity of the monarchy. She discovered that the Queen Mother had single-handedly prevented several international incidents through private diplomatic efforts that had never been publicly acknowledged.
Most surprisingly, she found extensive documentation about Charles's private charitable work, efforts that went far beyond his official role, and that he had specifically requested be kept secret so that they couldn't be seen as politically motivated. The files revealed a man whose dedication to social causes was far more extensive and personal than anyone in the public knew. But the files also contained troubling information about external threats to the royal family that extended far beyond the obvious concerns about paparazzi and tabloid journalism. Diana had documented evidence of foreign intelligence services that had attempted to blackmail royal family members, criminal organizations that had planned to kidnap royal children for ransom, and even terrorist groups that had developed specific plans for attacking royal residences. Most concerning was a section of files devoted to what Diana called the Pretenders, a network of individuals who claimed to have legitimate rights to the throne and who had been working for decades to undermine the current royal family's legitimacy. These weren't the harmless eccentrics who occasionally appeared in tabloids claiming royal heritage. These were well-funded, sophisticated operators who had access to forged documents, legal scholars who specialized in succession law, and even sympathizers within the British establishment. Catherine realized that part of her role as guardian was to monitor these threats and take action to neutralize them when necessary. Diana's files contained detailed intelligence about the most dangerous pretenders, including financial records that showed they were receiving support from foreign governments who saw an opportunity to destabilize British political institutions. One file in particular caught Catherine's attention. It documented the activities of a man named Edmund Blackwood, who claimed to be the descendant of a secret marriage between a 17th-century king and a commoner. Blackwood had spent millions of dollars over the past 20 years assembling what appeared to be compelling evidence for his claim, including documents that looked authentic enough to fool historical experts. What made Blackwood particularly dangerous was his intelligence and patience. He wasn't making public claims or seeking media attention. Instead, he was quietly building legal and historical cases that he planned to present at a moment when the monarchy was most vulnerable, possibly during the transition from Elizabeth's reign to Charles's. Diana's files revealed that Blackwood had been getting closer to information that could genuinely threaten the royal family's legitimacy. He had discovered the existence of certain historical documents that were stored in the true treasury, and he had begun making inquiries that suggested he might know about the secret chamber itself. Catherine felt a chill as she realized that her role as guardian might require her to take active measures to protect the monarchy from threats like Blackwood. Diana's notes included detailed contingency plans for dealing with various types of threats, ranging from subtle misinformation campaigns to more direct interventions that Catherine preferred not to think about too carefully. As she studied these files, Catherine began to understand why the Queen had been so insistent about her accepting this responsibility immediately. The threats to the monarchy were not theoretical possibilities for the distant future. They were real and present dangers that required constant vigilance and decisive action. The secure communication device that the Queen had given her suddenly chimed with an incoming message.
Catherine's heart raced as she realized this was the first time she had received an emergency communication since becoming guardian. The message was from Professor Elizabeth Hartwell, a historian at Oxford who was one of Diana's most trusted contacts.
Professor Hartwell's message was brief but alarming. Edmund Blackwood has made contact with archivists at Canterbury Cathedral. He's asking very specific questions about 17th century marriage records that were supposedly destroyed in a fire.
His questions suggest he knows more than he should. Recommend immediate consultation.
Catherine felt the weight of her responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders as she realized that her first real test as guardian was beginning.
Blackwood's inquiry about marriage records could be coincidental,
But given Diana's warnings about his activities, it was more likely that he was getting dangerously close to information that could threaten the entire royal family. She accessed Diana's contingency files for dealing with the Blackwood threat and found detailed plans that were more sophisticated than anything she could have imagined. Diana had been monitoring Blackwood's activities for years and had developed multiple strategies for neutralizing his threat without directly confronting him. The most immediately useful plan involved discrediting Blackwood's research by introducing false information into the historical record that would make his documents appear to be forgeries. Diana had identified several archivists and historians who could be trusted to plant convincing but ultimately false evidence that would undermine Blackwood's claims if he ever tried to make them public. But implementing this plan would require Catherine to make decisions that felt morally questionable. She would be deliberately corrupting historical records and misleading researchers who were simply trying to do their jobs honestly. The utilitarian argument for these actions was clear. Protecting the monarchy served the greater good, but Catherine struggled with the ethical implications of deliberately spreading false information. As she sat in the treasury, surrounded by the real treasures of British history, Catherine realized that being guardian meant accepting moral ambiguity as a permanent part of her life. She would often be forced to choose between competing values, between honesty and security, between transparency and protection. The decisions she made would be judged by their consequences, not by their adherence to absolute moral principles. Taking a deep breath, Catherine began implementing Diana's plan to neutralize the Blackwood threat. She sent carefully crafted messages to 3 different archives, providing them with documents that would cast doubt on Blackwood's research while appearing to be legitimate historical discoveries. Within days, these documents would begin appearing in academic databases, creating a paper trail that would make Blackwood's claims appear fabricated if he ever tried to present them publicly. As she finished her work for the night and prepared to leave the treasury, Catherine reflected on how much her life had changed since she first read Diana's letter in the bank vault. She had accepted a role that required her to make decisions that could affect millions of lives, to carry secrets that could never be shared, and to take actions that challenged her deepest moral convictions. But she had also gained a sense of purpose that went far beyond her official royal duties. She was protecting not just the monarchy but the stability and security that the monarchy provided for the entire nation. Every decision she made, every secret she kept, and every action she took served to preserve institutions and traditions that had guided Britain through centuries of change and challenge. Walking back through the secret passages to the main palace, Catherine felt the presence of all the women who had carried this burden before her. She was part of an unbroken chain of guardians who had protected the monarchy's most precious secrets and most dangerous knowledge. Tomorrow she would return to her public role as Princess of Wales. But tonight she had taken another step toward becoming the woman Diana had always known she could be. 1 year after Queen Elizabeth II passed away peacefully in her sleep, Catherine stood once again in the true treasury, but this time she was not alone. Across from her sat King Charles III, his face reflecting the weight of grief and responsibility that had settled on his shoulders since ascending the throne. The moment Catherine had dreaded since becoming guardian had finally arrived, the time to reveal to the new monarch the existence of the chamber and the responsibility that came with knowing about it. "I must confess, Catherine," Charles said quietly, his voice echoing in the vast space. "Mother prepared me for many aspects of being king, but she never mentioned anything quite like this." His eyes moved across the treasury's treasures with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "How long have you known about all of this?" Catherine chose her words carefully. "Since shortly before the Queen's passing, Your Majesty." She felt it was important that the guardian be established and trained before the transition of the crown. She couldn't tell him the full truth about Diana's preparation and planning without revealing secrets that even the king wasn't meant to know. Charles nodded slowly, beginning to understand the delicate balance of knowledge and secrecy that had protected the monarchy for generations. "And you've been making decisions about these artifacts for the past year? Determining what information should be released and what should remain hidden?" "Yes," Catherine replied, then gestured toward a series of display cases that held artifacts she had been studying intensively. "The medical breakthrough announced last month by Johns Hopkins regarding autoimmune treatments? The archaeological discoveries in South America that had advanced our understanding of pre-Columbian civilizations? The new insights into Shakespearean authorship that have been published by Cambridge scholars? All of these discoveries trace back to information that was carefully released from this collection." Charles stared at her with new understanding. "You've been systematically changing the world, piece by piece, using knowledge that has been hidden here for centuries." "That was Diana's vision," Catherine said, then caught herself. She had revealed more than she intended, but Charles's sharp intelligence had already caught the slip. "Diana knew about this place?" he asked. his voice filled with surprise and something that might have been hurt. Catherine realized she had reached a moment that would define her relationship with the new king. She could continue to hide Diana's full involvement, or she could trust Charles with a truth that might help him understand the scope of what he was being asked to accept. "Your late wife was the guardian before me," Catherine said quietly. "She spent the final years of her life cataloging everything in this treasury and developing strategies for gradually releasing the most beneficial information to the world. She also established a global network of trusted researchers and scholars who help implement these releases without ever knowing their true source." Charles was quiet for a long time, processing this revelation about a side of his former wife that he had never known existed.
When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a complex mixture of admiration and sorrow. "She never told me," he said simply. "All those nights when she would disappear for hours, all those mysterious phone calls and secret meetings, I thought..." He trailed off, unwilling to voice the suspicions that had poisoned their marriage.
"She was protecting you," Catherine said gently. "The guardian's role exists partly to shield the monarch from having to make these impossible decisions. You know this treasury exists, but you'll never be told what specific actions I take or what information I choose to release. That burden is mine alone to carry." Charles looked around the treasury with new eyes, understanding for the first time the magnitude of what Catherine was managing. "But surely you don't make these decisions entirely alone. The responsibility must be overwhelming." Catherine smiled sadly. "Diana left me extensive guidance and a network of advisors who don't know their advisors. But ultimately, yes, the final decisions are mine. And the isolation is the heaviest part of the burden." As if sensing her emotional state, Charles reached out and took her hand. "I'm beginning to understand what Mother meant when she said you were the strongest member of our family. Catherine, what you're doing, what you've committed to doing, goes far beyond duty. You're sacrificing your peace of mind, your ability to share your deepest concerns with William, your very sense of normalcy, all to protect not just our family, but the entire nation." Catherine felt tears threatening to spill as she heard her sacrifice acknowledged by someone who finally understood its scope. For a year, she had carried this burden alone, making decisions that affected millions of lives while maintaining the facade of being simply a devoted princess and mother. "There's something else you need to know," Catherine said, leading Charles to a section of the treasury that she had been hesitant to show him. "The threats to the monarchy are more serious than the public knows. Diana documented evidence of organized efforts to undermine our family's legitimacy, and those efforts have intensified since your accession to the throne." She showed him the files about Edmund Blackwood and the network of pretenders who had been working to challenge the royal family's right to rule. Charles studied the intelligence reports with growing alarm, realizing that the threats his family faced went far beyond the obvious dangers of public criticism and media scrutiny. "Some of these people have been funded by foreign governments," Catherine explained. "Others are motivated by genuine belief in their own claims to the throne. But all of them represent potential crises that could destabilize not just the monarchy but the entire constitutional system of government." Charles looked up from the files, his expression grave. "What actions have you taken to address these threats?" Catherine hesitated, knowing that her next words would forever change how the king saw both her and the role of the monarchy in protecting British interests. "I've implemented several of Diana's contingency plans. False historical documents have been introduced into academic databases to discredit the most dangerous claims. Researchers working for potential pretenders have been given access to information that leads them away from legitimate discoveries. In some cases, financial investigations have been initiated that have resulted in the freezing of assets that were being used to fund anti-monarchist activities." The king stared at her in amazement. "You've been conducting covert operations to protect the crown?" "Diana established the framework," Catherine replied. "I've simply been implementing her plans and adapting them to new threats as they emerge. The network she created includes people in intelligence services, financial institutions, academic organizations, and media companies around the world. Most of them don't know they're part of a coordinated effort, but together they provide the monarchy with capabilities that extend far beyond what any official government agency could offer."
Charles walked to one of the windows in the treasury, looking out at the London skyline as he processed the full implications of what Catherine was telling him.
"Do you ever question whether what you're doing is right? Whether the monarchy is worth these kinds of efforts to protect it?" Catherine joined him at the window.
"Every day," she admitted. "But then I think about the stability that constitutional monarchy provides, the way our institutions have guided Britain through wars and economic crises and social upheaval.
I think about the charitable organizations that depend on royal patronage, the communities that benefit from the attention and resources we can bring to their problems.
I think about the role we play in maintaining Britain's soft power and cultural influence around the world.
She paused, choosing her next words carefully. But most of all, I think about the alternative.
If the monarchy were to fall, if our constitutional system were to collapse, what would replace it? The people who are working to undermine us aren't offering better alternatives.
They're simply trying to create chaos that they can exploit for their own benefit. Charles nodded slowly. You've become something more than a guardian, Catherine. You've become the monarchy's shield against forces that most people don't even know exist. That's what Diana intended, Catherine replied.
She understood that the modern world presents threats that are more subtle but potentially more devastating than anything previous generations faced. Foreign interference, financial manipulation, information warfare. These are weapons that can destroy institutions without anyone realizing they're under attack until it's too late. They spent the next several hours reviewing Diana's files and Catherine's additions to them. Charles learned about cyber threats that had been neutralized before they could damage royal communication systems, about media manipulation campaigns that had been countered before they could influence public opinion, and about financial schemes that had been disrupted before they could undermine the economic foundations that supported the monarchy's activities.
As their meeting drew to a close, Charles turned to Catherine with an expression of profound gratitude and concern. How do I protect you from this burden, Catherine?
How do I ensure that this responsibility doesn't destroy the woman my son loves? Catherine smiled, touched by his concern but also aware that he couldn't truly understand the isolation that came with her role. You protect me by trusting me to make the right decisions, even when you don't know what those decisions are.
You protect me by ensuring that William never suspects the true scope of what I do. And you protect me by remembering that what I'm doing serves a purpose larger than any of our individual concerns.
As they prepared to leave the treasury, Charles asked one final question that Catherine had been dreading. When the time comes for you to choose your successor, how will you know who can handle this responsibility? Catherine was quiet for a moment, thinking about Diana's careful preparation and the qualities that had led to her own selection. Diana chose me not because I was perfect, but because I had the right combination of strength, intelligence, and moral flexibility to handle impossible decisions. She also chose me because I understood that love sometimes requires sacrifice, that protecting the people you care about sometimes means carrying burdens they can never know about.
She looked directly at Charles, her expression serious. When the time comes, I'll choose someone who understands that being a guardian means accepting isolation as the price of service.
Someone who can make decisions based on long-term consequences rather than immediate gratification. Someone who has the courage to act when action is necessary, but also the wisdom to know when inaction is the better choice.
As they left the treasury and sealed it behind them, Catherine felt a shift in her relationship with the royal family. She was no longer just William's wife or Charles's daughter-in-law. She was the keeper of the monarchy's deepest secrets and the architect of its hidden defenses. The weight of that responsibility was enormous. But it was also a source of profound purpose that connected her to generations of women who had carried similar burdens. Walking back through the secret passages to the main palace, Catherine reflected on how completely her life had been transformed by Diana's gift. She had accepted a role that required her to operate in shadows, to make decisions that could never be acknowledged publicly, and to carry secrets that would die with her. But she had also gained the power to shape history in ways that could benefit millions of people and protect institutions that had served her nation for centuries. The next morning, Catherine returned to her official duties as Princess of Wales, attending a charity event for children with disabilities and meeting with representatives from environmental organizations. To the outside world, she appeared to be exactly what she had always been, a devoted wife and mother who was gracefully fulfilling her royal responsibilities. But beneath that public facade, Catherine carried the knowledge that she was something far more significant. She was the guardian of secrets that could change the world, the protector of a monarchy that served as a foundation for democratic governance, and the inheritor of a legacy of service that stretched back through centuries of extraordinary women who had understood that some burdens can only be carried in silence. As she smiled for photographers and spoke with charity representatives, Catherine felt Diana's presence guiding her every action.
The late princess had given her more than just access to hidden treasures and secret knowledge. She had given her a purpose that transcended personal ambition or public recognition, a calling that connected her to the deepest traditions of service and sacrifice that had always defined the best aspects of royal duty. The Queen's final wish had been fulfilled. Catherine had proven herself worthy of the trust that had been placed in her, and she would carry that trust forward into an uncertain future, protecting the monarchy and serving the nation in ways that would never be acknowledged but would always be essential. The secret treasure reserved solely for Kate had transformed her from a princess into something far more powerful, a guardian whose actions would echo through history long after her name was forgotten by the public she had chosen to serve. The Queen's final wish, a secret treasure reserved solely for Kate.